Hi beloved brothers and sisters. A quick one before we move into today's experience. This experience is most important to believers, parents, single mothers, and elderly people. Jesus revealed to this young child a disturbing event that is already happening, a satanic, calculated agenda designed to destroy mankind. But the most shocking part of this experience was when Jesus revealed to him the date and what will take place by the end of October. We would have loved to simply tell you about the enemy's tragic plans, but every person who sends in his or her experience deserves to have it shared just as they sent it. So please, be patient, beloved, and watch this to the end. It could help you save yourself and your family. Now, kindly tell us where you are watching from so we can connect together as one family and continue to pray for one another. Now, let's go into the experience. My name is Rebecca Carter, and I'm writing this from our home in Charleston, South Carolina. What I'm about to share with you is the most terrifying yet life-changing experience our family has ever been through. It's about my son, Mage Carter, who was 15 years old when he died and came back to life with a message that has completely transformed how we live. This happened on the 12th of September. I mean, that was the day he started all this with. I need to tell you this story exactly as it happened, not because I want attention or because I'm trying to scare anyone, but because Mage made me promise I would share what he experienced. He said other kids need to know what he saw, especially boys around 12 or 13 years old who might be going through what he was going through before the accident. Although he reveals a date when there will be a terrible release of demonic operation, and the most scary part are the things he told me. Beloved, please listen and get yourself prepared if you still use phone. Mage had just gotten home from soccer practice, and like most days, he went straight to his room. I remember calling him down for dinner 3 times before he finally came downstairs, and even then, he barely looked up from his phone. His younger sister Emma kept trying to talk to him about her day at school, but he just gave her one-word answers while scrolling through whatever app had his attention that moment. After dinner, Mage asked if he could ride his bike to his friend Tyler's house about 6 blocks away. It was still light outside, and he'd made that trip hundreds of times, so we said yes. He grabbed his bike from the garage, and I noticed he was putting his phone in his pocket as he walked out. I almost said something about being careful and paying attention to the road, but I didn't. I wish I had. That's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. What happened next, we had to piece together from witnesses and the police report. Mage was riding his bike down Maple Street, heading toward the intersection at 5th Avenue. According to a woman who was watering her garden, Mage was looking down at something, probably his phone, when he reached the intersection. He didn't stop at the stop sign. A delivery truck coming from the left had the right of way, and the driver didn't have time to stop. The impact threw Mage 15 feet from his bike. The woman said she screamed and ran toward him, but he wasn't moving. I got the call at 6:47 in the evening. When you're a parent and your phone rings with an unknown number during dinner time, your stomach drops. A calm voice on the other end said there had been an accident involving my son, and I needed to get to Charleston Memorial Hospital immediately. A lot happened at that moment, but I will keep it receive. When we got to the emergency room, a doctor met us right away. She told us Mage had suffered severe head trauma and internal injuries. They were doing everything they could, but we needed to prepare ourselves. Those words, prepare ourselves, felt like someone had reached into my chest and grabbed my heart. We weren't allowed to see him yet because they were still working on him, trying to stabilize him enough for surgery. We sat in that waiting room for what felt like forever. Marcus was pacing back and forth, and I was praying, just repeating the same prayer over and over, asking God to save my son, to give him another chance, to not take him from us. Other families were in that waiting room too, all of us connected by fear and hope, but I felt completely alone in my terror. The next 3 days were the hardest of my life. Mage remained unconscious, and the doctors weren't sure when or if he would wake up. Family and friends came to visit and pray. Our pastor, Pastor Michael Thompson, came every day and sat with us. Emma was staying with her grandmother, and I could hear the fear in her voice every time I called to update her. Marcus and I took turns sitting by Mage bed, holding his hand, talking to him, playing his favorite music, anything to let him know we were there. On the 4th day, something changed. Mage eyes opened slowly, and he looked confused and scared. The first thing he said to me was something I didn't expect. He said, "Mom, I need to tell you what I saw." I thought he meant the accident, maybe he remembered what happened, but he shook his head when I started to ask about the bike and the truck. He said, "No, Mom, I mean when I died. I saw something, and Jesus showed me things I need to tell people about." Mage was still weak, but he insisted on telling me everything while it was fresh in his mind. The doctors wanted him to rest, but he kept saying he needed to get this out, that it was important. So I sat beside his hospital bed with my notebook, and I wrote down everything he told me, exactly as he described it. He said that when his heart stopped, he didn't feel pain anymore. One moment there was this crushing pressure and fear, and the next moment he felt like he was floating. He told me he could see the emergency room below him, could see the doctors and nurses working on his body, doing chest compressions, shouting instructions to each other. He said it felt strange to see himself down there, like watching a movie of someone else, but knowing it was him. He wasn't scared though. He felt peaceful, more peaceful than he'd ever felt in his life. Mageboth told me that in front of him, there was this massive room that stretched farther than he could see. And filling this room, everywhere he looked, were phones. Not just a few phones, but thousands and thousands of them. They were displayed on tables, floating in the air, arranged on shelves that went up forever. He recognized every kind. The latest iPhones, Samsung Galaxy phones, Google Pixels, all the brands that kids at his school talked about and wanted. Each phone was glowing, screens lit up showing different apps and games and social media platforms. Some showed Instagram feeds, others had TikTok videos playing, some had video games with bright colors and exciting action. He said the phones seemed to be calling to him somehow. Not with actual voices, but he felt drawn to them, like a pull he couldn't quite resist. The screens were showing things he liked, videos he would normally watch, games he loved to play, messages from his friends. He told me he started walking toward them because he felt this strong urge to pick one up. It was automatic, like how you reach for your phone when you're bored or waiting or just because it's there. He didn't even think about it. As Mageboth got closer to the phones, he said he noticed other people in the room. They were like shadows at first, but as he focused, he could see them more clearly. These were kids and teenagers, some younger than him, some older, and they were all reaching for phones too. Everyone seemed anxious, like they needed to grab a phone immediately. Some kids were actually running toward the displays, pushing past each other to get to the newest models. The whole room had this feeling of urgency and want. Mageboth said he reached out toward a phone that was showing his favorite basketball game. His hand was inches from it, ready to pick it up, when something made him stop. He told me it was like a voice in his head, not words exactly, but a feeling that said wait, look closer, pay attention. So he pulled his hand back and just stood there watching. That's when he saw it. Right there on the table next to the phone he almost grabbed, there was something that looked like a handcuff. But it wasn't a regular handcuff made of metal. He said it looked like it was made of shadows and darkness, but somehow solid at the same time. It was attached to the phone somehow, connected to it. He stepped back and started looking at the other phones, and every single one had the same thing. These shadow handcuffs were attached to each device, waiting. Mageboth told me he stood there, confused and starting to feel nervous, and he decided to just watch what happened when other people picked up the phones. A girl who looked about 13 walked up near him and grabbed an iPhone without hesitation. The moment her hand touched it, the shadow handcuffs snapped around her wrist. She didn't seem to notice at first. She just started scrolling through the phone, smiling at what she saw on the screen. But Mageboth could see the handcuff was real and it was locked on her. Then he saw something that terrified him. From behind the girl, out of nowhere, this dark figure appeared. He said it wasn't solid like a person, but it was definitely there. It was made of the same shadowy material as the handcuffs, and it had this presence that felt heavy and wrong. The dark figure moved right up behind the girl and put its hands on her shoulders. She still didn't notice. She just kept scrolling on the phone, but Mageboth could see that the dark figure was controlling her movements now, guiding what she looked at, influencing where her fingers went on the screen. He watched the same thing happen over and over. Mageboth said he started backing away from the phones, his heart pounding even though he wasn't sure if he had a heart in this place. He looked around the room again and really saw what was happening. All these kids with phones handcuffed to them, all of them with dark spirits standing behind them, controlling them. And none of the kids seemed aware of it. They thought they were freely choosing what to watch and what to do, but Mageboth could see the truth. The dark spirits were in charge, making the kids scroll endlessly, feeding them certain content, keeping them trapped and distracted. That's when Mageboth told me he heard a voice, and he knew immediately who it was. He said he felt a presence beside him that was completely different from the dark spirits. This presence was warm and full of light and love. He turned and saw Jesus standing next to him. Mageboth said he couldn't describe exactly what Jesus looked like because the light and love coming from him was too bright and overwhelming, but he knew without any doubt who it was. Jesus didn't speak out loud, Mageboth said, but he communicated directly to his heart and mind. He showed Mageboth that he wanted him to understand something important, something he needed to take back and tell others about. Jesus let him know that the room full of phones represented what was really happening in the spiritual world when kids and teenagers get caught up in their devices. He revealed to Mageboth that every phone, every screen, every device that pulls kids away from real life and real relationships has a darkness attached to it, and that darkness wants to control and trap and destroy. Jesus told Mageboth that the handcuffs represented addiction. He explained that when kids start spending more and more time on screens, they don't realize they are becoming trapped. It feels like freedom because you can access anything you want, see anything you want, but really it's a prison. The handcuffs lock on gradually, so slowly that you don't notice until you can't let go anymore. You feel like you need to check your phone constantly, like you're missing something if you're not scrolling, like you can't be happy or entertained without a screen in front of you. Then Jesus showed Mageboth something even more disturbing. He revealed to him that the dark spirits weren't just random. Each one had a specific job. Some were spirits of comparison and jealousy, showing kids pictures and videos that made them feel bad about themselves. Some were spirits of anger and division, feeding them content that made them upset or mean. Some were spirits of lust, leading them toward things they were too young to see. Some were spirits of fear and anxiety, bombarding them with bad news and scary information. Some were spirits of pride and vanity, making them obsessed with likes and followers and comments. Mageboth told me that after Jesus showed him what was happening to kids and teenagers with phones, he thought that was the end of the vision. But Jesus let him know there was more he needed to see, something even more serious that adults needed to understand, especially parents and church leaders and people who considered themselves strong believers. Jesus revealed to Mageboth that the room with phones wasn't just for young people. He showed him that the same thing was happening to adults, but in ways that were often more hidden and more dangerous. Mageboth said Jesus walked him to another part of this spiritual realm, and there he saw grown men and women, people who looked like pastors and church members and regular parents, and they all had phones handcuffed to their wrists too. But the dark spirits behind them were different, more powerful, more strategic. Jesus explained to Mageboth that when adults get trapped by screens, the enemy uses different tactics. With kids, the dark spirits use comparison and distraction and entertainment. But with adults, especially believers, the spirits that attach to the phones are spirits of immorality, compromise, and spiritual death. Mageboth said he could see these spirits were bigger, darker, more aggressive than the ones controlling the kids. He told me Jesus showed him how it works. An adult would pick up their phone, maybe just to check the news or respond to a work email, something that seemed innocent and necessary. But the handcuff would still lock on. Then the dark spirit would start working slowly, patiently. It would guide them to spend just a little more time scrolling. Just one more article. Just a few more minutes on social media. Just checking what's happening in the world. The person would think they were in control, that they were just staying informed or connected, but the handcuff was tightening. Jesus revealed to Mageboth that the spirit of immorality was especially active in attacking adults through their phones. Mageboth said he saw men, good men who loved God and loved their families, who got led down paths they never intended to go. It would start so small. An advertisement with an inappropriate image. A suggested video that was slightly provocative. A movie clip that pushed boundaries. The spirit would whisper, "It's not that bad, everyone sees this stuff, you're just being realistic about the world, you're an adult so you can handle it." Mageboth watched as these small compromises opened doors. The spirit of immorality would then suggest stronger content, things these men would have been horrified by a few years earlier. But the handcuff was locked tight now, and the addiction was strong. Jesus told Mage that many men who started out as strong believers, men who led Bible studies and served in church and prayed with their families, ended up falling into serious sin because they didn't guard their phones, didn't guard their eyes, didn't recognize the handcuffs locking onto them. He showed Mage how marriages were being destroyed. Men looking at things on their phones that broke trust with their wives. Women spending hours comparing their lives to others online, becoming bitter and dissatisfied with their husbands and families. Jesus revealed that the enemy was using phones to release a flood of immorality into homes, even Christian homes, even homes where people read their Bibles and went to church every Sunday. But Mage said the most disturbing thing Jesus showed him was about faith itself. He revealed to Mage that he was seeing people's faith literally shutting down because of phone use. Jesus showed him what it looked like in the spiritual realm when someone's faith was active and alive. Their spirit would glow with light, connected to God like a power cord plugged into an outlet. But when that person got trapped by their phone, when they spent hours and hours scrolling instead of praying, consuming content instead of consuming God's word, their light would start to flicker and dim. Mage watched as person after person, believers who had once been on fire for God, slowly had their faith shut down. The dark spirits behind them would feed them just enough spiritual content to make them feel like they were still connected to God. A Bible verse here, an inspirational quote there, maybe a worship song playing in the background while they scrolled. But Jesus revealed to Mage that this wasn't real faith, it was a counterfeit. Their spirits were dimming, their connection to God was weakening, but they couldn't see it because they were so distracted by the screens. Jesus told Mage that the enemy had a specific strategy, a coordinated attack plan that was already in motion. He revealed to him that starting in October and running through November, there would be an intensified release of these dark spirits, specifically targeting believers. Mage said Jesus showed him on a spiritual calendar how the timing was planned. The enemy knew that December was when Christians celebrated Christmas, when many people who didn't normally go to church would show up, when believers had opportunities to share their faith with family members, when the message of Jesus being born to save the world was at the center of attention. So the plan was to attack hard in October and November, to get believers so trapped in their phones, so compromised morally, so dimmed in their faith that by the time December came, they wouldn't be in good standing with God. They wouldn't have the spiritual power to be lights for Jesus. Their testimonies would be weakened or destroyed. Their families would see the hypocrisy. The unsaved relatives showing up for Christmas would see believers who talked about Jesus but lived like everyone else, staring at screens all day, short-tempered and distracted, no different from the world. Jesus revealed to Mage that this wasn't just coincidental timing. The dark spirits were organized and strategic. They knew that if they could knock out believers during October and November with phone addiction, moral compromise, and spiritual coldness, then the Christmas season would be a wasted opportunity for the kingdom of God. People who might have been reached with the gospel would instead see powerless, distracted Christians and would want nothing to do with that kind of faith. Mage told me that Jesus showed him specific ways this attack was already starting. He saw how the dark spirits were using election news and political content to get believers angry and divided, spending hours fighting with people online instead of praying. He saw how they were using fear about the economy and world events to get people anxious and distracted, constantly checking their phones for the latest updates instead of trusting God. He saw how they were using entertainment, endless shows and movies and videos, to eat up time that should have been spent in worship and Bible reading and family connection. Jesus revealed to Mage that even strong believers, people who had walked with God for years, were vulnerable if they weren't watching out for their faith. He told him that the handcuffs could lock on anyone who wasn't vigilant, who didn't set boundaries with their devices, who didn't recognize that this was a spiritual battle. He showed Mage pastors who were struggling, worship leaders who were compromised, Sunday school teachers who were dimmed in their spirits, all because of what they were allowing into their lives through their phones. Mage said Jesus was very clear that this wasn't about phones being evil in themselves. The phone was just a tool, a doorway. But it was a doorway the enemy had figured out how to exploit brilliantly. He revealed that in previous generations, the enemy used other doorways, other methods of attack. But in this generation, phones and screens had become the primary battlefield because they were so personal, so constant, so addictive, and so accepted. Nobody thought twice about someone being on their phone all day. It had become normal, expected, just part of modern life. And that's exactly what made it so dangerous. Jesus told Mage that adults needed to wake up to this reality. He revealed that parents couldn't protect their kids from the handcuffs if the parents themselves were trapped. Church leaders couldn't lead people to spiritual freedom if the leaders were in bondage to their devices. Husbands and wives couldn't have strong marriages if both of them were married to their phones. The family couldn't be healthy if everyone was isolated in their own digital prison. Mage watched as Jesus showed him what was going to happen in homes over the next few months if believers didn't take this warning seriously. He saw October and November passing with families barely interacting, everyone on their devices. He saw church services where people showed up physically but were mentally checked out, thinking about getting back to their phones. He saw Bible study groups where people brought their phones and kept checking them instead of engaging with God's Word. He saw prayer meetings that were short and shallow because people were anxious to get back to scrolling. Then Jesus showed him December arriving. Christmas came, but the believers were spiritually weak, drained, compromised. Lost family members showed up for holiday gatherings and saw Christians who were no different from them, addicted to screens, irritable, distracted, empty. The opportunities to share Jesus were missed because the believers had nothing real to share. Their faith had been shut down by months of phone addiction and spiritual neglect. But Jesus also showed Mage the alternative. He revealed what could happen if believers heeded the warning, if they recognized the handcuffs and broke free, if they guarded their faith during October and November instead of letting it dim. Mage saw families putting boundaries on phone use, having real conversations, praying together. He saw believers getting back into their Bibles daily, spending time in worship, reconnecting with God in deep ways. He saw churches waking up to the reality of this spiritual battle and helping people break free from digital bondage. Jesus told Mage that when believers walked in freedom, when their faith was strong and bright, when they were truly connected to God instead of to screens, then December would be powerful. Lost family members would notice something different about them. They would see real joy, real peace, real love. They would see people who weren't controlled by devices, who could be present in the moment, who had something genuine to offer. The gospel would be shared with power because it would be coming from people who were actually living it, not just posting about it. Jesus revealed to Mage that the church needed to understand this was war. He explained that the enemy had been winning this battle for years because believers didn't recognize it was happening. They thought phone addiction was just a minor issue, maybe something that affected teenagers but not serious Christians. But Jesus showed Mage the truth. The spirits of immorality, distraction, comparison, anger, fear, and spiritual death that were attached to phones had infiltrated Christian homes, Christian marriages, and Christian churches. Believers were falling left and right, and many didn't even realize they were down because they looked just like everyone else, phones in hand, scrolling away their spiritual power. Mage told me that Jesus made it very clear this was urgent. He let him know that October was starting, that the intensified attack was already underway, that believers needed to respond immediately. He revealed that those who took this warning seriously, who examined their phone use honestly, who were willing to set strict boundaries and break the handcuffs, would be protected and strengthened. But those who dismissed it, who thought they were fine, who kept living the same way they had been living, would find themselves spiritually weakened by December, possibly fallen into serious compromise, definitely less effective for the kingdom. Jesus told Mage to tell parents specifically that they needed to lead by example. He revealed that kids would never take phone boundaries seriously if they saw their parents on devices constantly. Dads needed to put down their phones and engage with their families. Moms needed to stop comparing their lives to others on social media and be present with their children. If parents wanted to save their kids from the handcuffs, they had to first break free from their own. Mage said Jesus emphasized that this wasn't about legalism or creating a bunch of rules. It was about freedom. The handcuffs were real bondage, real slavery. Breaking free meant being able to actually live again, to experience real joy and real connection and real relationship with God. Jesus revealed that he had come to set captives free, and these phone handcuffs were just another form of captivity that he wanted to break in the lives of believers. Finally, Jesus told Mage something that really stuck with him. He revealed that believers needed to pray specifically against these spirits of immorality and addiction that were being released. He explained that prayer was powerful, that when believers recognized the spiritual nature of the battle and called on God's power, the handcuffs could be broken, the dark spirits had to flee, and freedom was available. But the prayers had to be serious, consistent, and backed up by real action, real boundaries, real changes in behavior.